Hello everyone, welcome to Mugello and the first round of the 2018 season of the Ferrari Challenge. The season starts where the 2017 season ended, here at this circuit situated in Tuscany, some 5.245 kilometers, 14 turns, 6 left, 8 right, and that's the calendar for the year. Silverstone, Spa-Francorchamps, Misano, under the lights, Brno, Barcelona and Monza, the glittering finale mondiale. That's where we're heading during 2018. Right now we're heading down to the track, and the safety car there is ready to lead the cars away for race number 1, the Mugello safety car. And the Trofeo Pirelli drivers are lined up behind it. Split, as always, in 2 categories, pros and AM drivers. So that's exactly where we are then, the opening round here in Mugello. This challenging circuit, quite technical, very flowing as well. Be a challenge for all these drivers, but of course, many of them were here right at the end of the season and are back here for the beginning of this one as well. So some great shots, as always, being taken of preparations ahead of the start of race number 1. There is the track, 5.2 kilometers, as I mentioned, some 14 turns, 6 of them left, 8 of them right. Incidentally, one of the driver coaches in the Ferrari Challenge, Babulous Matteo Santaponte, is the guy that has the fastest lap here at the Mugello circuit. Air temperature is really rather chilly, 12 degrees, sadly. And there we look at our pole position driver, Niklas Nielsen. 2 wins in Ferrari Challenge. Interestingly, both of them came here at the Mugello circuit at the end of last year. So Niklas Nielsen then being wished best of luck from his team, the Formula Racing team. And you certainly wouldn't bet against Niklas Nielsen taking a pole to checkered flag here at Mugello. We will see. Alongside him, though, is the very fast German driver, Bjorn Grossman. Okay, so as I mentioned, Mugello is the start of the season in the beautiful Tuscan countryside here in Italy. So there, all the social media for you to be part of the Ferrari Challenge as we look at the British driver, Chris Froggatt. 3 wins in Ferrari Challenge, looking for the AM Championship this year. And let's hear now from Jens Liebhauser.
Hello, I'm Jens Liebhauser from Germany. I'm driving for Formula Racing and AF Corse, and I'm ready for the season in 2018 here in Mugello. I'm happy to start the season 2018 here in Mugello, where I won last year the European champion and the world champion title. Let's see what this weekend brings. Trofeo Pirelli, we have new young pro drivers which make my life as hard as possible, I guess. And this is my beautiful car, which I'm racing this year. This is once again the Star 488 Challenge. I changed a bit the design to make it more visible in television and still keeping the camouflage. The Mugello circuit is very tricky, not only for the 488 Challenge, also for the MotoGP. A lot of up and down, fast corners like Arrabbiata 1 and 2. But now it's time to go and join the Ferrari Challenge.
So great to hear from Jens Liebhauser, who had a very, very successful season last year, as did this young lady, Fabienne Volvend, a winner at Imola 2017, the very first lady to win a Ferrari Challenge race outright. Fabienne Volvend did that being engineered by the Octane 126 team, and she's back this year. So great to see Fabienne, who is here at Mugello and all season long too. So a great grid of cars ready to do battle as we're on board with the Tommaso Rocca car, the Rosso Corsa driver. Tommaso Rocca racing in the AM category of the Trofeo Pirelli. 134 races contested from Tommaso Rocca. It's one of those drivers that is sometimes up, sometimes down, but you can never bet against Tommaso Rocca. As many of the engineers and team personnel leave the track now, we are but a few moments away from the race to get underway. So Scuderia Prague are back into the Ferrari Challenge this year. Good to see the team back with the Jean Danis car from P10 on the grid for race number 1. Niklas Nielsen, pole position. Alongside him is Bjorn Grossman. We're about to get the race underway. And here is the starting grid in full then. Niklas Nielsen going from pole position. Alongside him is Bjorn Grossman. Then is Henry Hassid and Chris Froggatt, the best of the AM drivers to show, going from P4 on the grid. Alessandro Vezzoni, who had an off in qualifying, goes from P5. Then the British racer Sam Smith from Stratstone Ferrari is going from P6 on the grid. As we continue our look down the grid, Jens Liebhauser, who we heard from just a few moments ago, goes from P7. Fabienne Volvend, the lady racer, goes P8. Then it's Podolicio from P9. Jan Danis, a returnee, from P10. From P11 it's Martin Nelson. Then Joga goes from P12 on the grid before we see Tommaso Rocca, Christian Overgaard, John Sawbridge, and Dylan goes from P16 on the grid. So about time then that we heard from our pole setter, the man that did everything in qualifying to put the car in P1.
Ciao ragazzi, I'm Niklas Nielsen. Fantastic to be back at this amazing track Mugello, and fantastic to take my third pole as well on this track. Just amazing.
And he had his hair done just for the weekend as well. High time that we introduced a guest in the studio alongside us, the Ferrari Driver Academy driver Callum Eilert, a single-seater star in his own right, will be racing in GP3 for the ART team this year. Hello, Callum.
Hello. It's good to be back in here.
Yeah, you like this commentating lark alongside me.
That's good fun.
Bet you won't. Niklas Nielsen, pole position. He's a driver you've raced against, Callum.
Yeah, I raced with him for 2 or 3 years in karting. It was always me and him at the front,
Yes.
with a couple of others, of course, but he was always one of the strongest drivers I raced against in karting. So it's good to see him at the front here in Ferrari Challenge, and hopefully he'll continue that.
Well, of course, you are in the FDA, the Ferrari Driver Academy, and congratulations on being held into that. That's great news. There are other, of course, Ferrari Driver Academy drivers, Charles Leclerc, of course, Guan Yu Zhu and Marcus, and lots of others as well. But it must be a real highlight, a real achievement in your career to get there.
Yeah, after last year finding out and doing the deal with Ferrari, it's been an amazing journey so far. I now live in Italy, so it's been a bit of a change for me, but I'm really enjoying it. And obviously, with a lot of other drivers in the academy, it's good to sort of be together, I guess.
Excellent. Well, we'll be hearing from Callum during the course of the race. He'll be giving us, he's not raced here at Mugello, but he has tested here on a number of occasions, and therefore he will be able to give us his insight on what our drivers should be doing out there. Thomas O'Rourke we're on board with right now. He's one of the AM drivers from Rosso Corsa then, Thomas O'Rourke. And we'll bring you a lot of onboard shots from various cars during the course of the race action. Some 30 minutes of hot rocking racing to come. All the social media at the top of the screen for you right now. And there is Martin Nelson, who, in my opinion, is one of the favourites for the AM Championship this year, along with Chris Froggatt and Jean Dennis, the returning Jean Dennis as well. Chris Froggatt, though, really did light up in qualifying, and he has beaten some 5 of the pro drivers in terms of qualifying to be much further up the grid order than some others. And actually, does that give you a psychological boost, Callum, that when you've done a really good job in quali, makes you feel even better ahead of the race?
Yeah, obviously there's a bit of confidence with it, but he's done an especially good job to be ahead of 5 other pro drivers, and to be honest, I would be quite confident, especially with that. But it's also probably a bit nervous, because if you're around a lot of pro drivers and you're in your first couple of seasons, it's a bit nerve-wracking. But I mean, if he's that fast, it should be a challenge, but not bad.
And Chris, of course, it's only his 2nd full season of racing. He came from a non-racing background. Let's let the music build the anticipation of the race start. Safety car has peeled off, the lights go green. Niklas Nielsen, then Bjorn Grossman, a drag race to turn number 1, which of course is a right-hander. Therefore, Niklas Nielsen should have the advantage going into turn number 1. Sure enough, it looks like he has. Bjorn Grossman's going to have to tuck in behind Henry Hassid in P3. Henry Hassid makes contact with the back end of the Bjorn Grossman car as they make their way through turn number 1, the San Donato turn. Already, Chris Froggatt is being hung out to dry just a little bit by Henry Hassid, who of course has got his nose in front, and Chris Froggatt has got Alessandro Bezzoni for company right behind him. So it is 3 pro drivers, and then the best of the AM drivers. Martin Nelson trying to make his way up the order in car number 13 as well, as we look at cars side by side, as this the opening lap of the first race of the Ferrari Challenge for 2018. To keep your eye on as well in the all-yellow car is Sam Smith, who had a lowly grid position, and he knows he's got more in the car than he was able to deliver in qualifying. He'll want to make his way up the order as well, and Jens Liebhauser is now pressuring Alessandro Bezzoni. Jens Liebhauser, winner of the World Championship and also the AM Championship last year. Martin Nelson there in the green and blue car just behind Sam Smith. So first lap of asking in this Mugello circuit then, as the cars beginning to spread themselves out. Niklas Nielsen with 4/10 worth of margin over Bjorn Grossman at the moment, but Grossman chasing him for all his worth through the chicane. And Henry Hassid in P3, leaving a little bit of a gap now over Chris Froggatt, Bezzoni, and then behind Bezzoni it's Liebhauser, then it's Jean Dennis and Podoliccio and Sam Smith. So Niklas Nielsen then did everything that he needed to do exactly right, heading in towards turn number 1. And as they crossed the timing line then, it was 4/10, it's now 6/10. And Niklas Nielsen leads Bjorn Grossman. So Niklas Nielsen leading from Grossman, Hassid, then the best of the AMs is Froggatt, and then it's Vetsoni and Jens Liebhauser. So always a drag race right at the very, very start, Callum Eilert, but Niklas Nielsen had got always track position advantage in going into turn number 1 on the inside.
Yeah, it's always very close. Luckily, he had a clear advantage on the inside and was able to maintain a little gap at the start. Whereas the others, I think, in P3 and P4 were very close and almost touching a lot of the time. So it's close, and it's still close in P4 and 5, I think, which will maintain a bit of action through the race, I think.
Board with Tommaso Roca then, who takes a huge amount of curb. Of course, in a big GT car like this, you can do that. In a single-seater like Callum races, you'd be in all sorts of trouble if you took that much curb, I'm guessing. But Tommaso Roca then, who is chasing down the car of John Sawbridge ahead of him. John had a big off in free practice. Good to see him in the Ferrari Challenge. Incidentally, he with the same route as Chris Froggatt, i.e. virtually no racing experience, went to the Middle East over the winter period to get the license and is now racing in the Ferrari Challenge. So big welcome to you here in the Ferrari Challenge. Niklas Nielsen now beginning to stretch his legs a little bit. And how critical is it if you're P2, Callum? You've got to try and keep on terms with the car ahead of you, but of course you're running in the dirty air that comes off the front of that car, back of that car.
Yeah, normally we'd say 1.8 seconds is the point at which you don't get affected by the dirty air.
Really? That much?
Okay, that was for Formula 3, so it might be a little bit different in this because it doesn't have as much of an effect because the downforce isn't as high as on single-seaters.
Sure.
But if you maintain a good gap of, say, a second, you'll be able to not get disturbed as much and maintain that. But then you also lose the slipstream from being close. So there's a plus and a minus to it.
So this is Tommaso Roca then on the inside. This is going through that turn. And Tommaso Roca, being squeezed there by the Sawbridge car. So John Sawbridge then in a spare car because of that off during and Sawbridge going through. As I mentioned, he had an off in free practice. Significant damage to the car. He's in a spare car, but good to see him out in the Ferrari Challenge. So Bjorn Grossman, who's won pretty much everything there is to win in the Ferrari Challenge, and up against Niklas Nielsen. Niklas Nielsen is a real young hotshot charger and proved his worth when he was here at the end of the season last year as a guest of Formula Racing and absolutely tore up the tarmac. He really did. And Bjorn Grossman is no slouch, that's for sure. Jolly good driver. And both of them have really pulled away from Henry Hassid, who's kind of out on his own in P3. Then it's Chris Froggatt and Alessandro Vetsoni and Jens Liebhauser. So Froggatt is the best of the AM drivers. The 1, 2, 3 in AMs at the moment. Froggatt, Jean Dennis, and then Martin Nelson, as we expected it to be. And now all of a sudden, Alessandro Vetsoni is really putting the pressure on Chris Froggatt. Now, top 3 in the pros. Nielsen, Grossman and Hassid. And here comes Alessandro Vetsoni on the inside of Chris Froggatt, and he goes through. To be honest, that's very sensible driving, is it not, from Chris Froggatt, because you know, he's in a separate classification and therefore getting involved in a battle like that, Callum, would be almost futile, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's not a good idea, especially when you have a little bit of a gap to the others. You want to maintain that gap to the people in your class. So he's been sensible there and let him past, which is clever, I guess.
So Chris Froggatt then moves a position on the track overall, but maintains his P1 position in the AM classification. So it's Froggatt, who's got Jens Liebhauser in between himself and the next AM driver, Jean Dennis, who's running in P7 in the race overall. But this is our race leader, Niklas Nielsen, the pro driver in the Trofeo Pirelli. He's some 9/10 ahead of Bjorn Grossman, the Octane 126 driver, who is P2. Then it's back to Henry Hassid. Henry Hassid last year had a phenomenal battle with Johnny Lawson. And Henry Hassid, very experienced racer. There is Chris Froggatt then, P1, as the graphics indicate, but it's P1 in class, P1 in AM. He is actually P5 in the race overall. And Jens Liebhauser is inching ever closer to the back of the number 93 car of Chris Froggatt. Sam Smith and Fabien Volven, P7 and P8, as you can see. We keep the ticker rolling across the bottom of the screen so you can keep up to speed on who is where. So the standings in Am, Froggatt, then it is Danis and Martin Nelson, P3. There is the number 92 car of Sam Smith, who, having a conversation with him earlier in the day, he said he's got the pace in the car, wasn't able to unlock it during qualifying. So at the moment he's chasing down the Licio car. There, the number 85 car of Policio. And Sam all over the back of that, trying to find the way past. Sam Smith, of course, to his third year of the Ferrari Challenge now for the British racer. In the first 8 minutes of this race done and dusted. The order then: Nielsen, Grossman, Hassid in the pros, and it's Froggatt, Danis and Nelson in the AMs. There is Tommaso Roca, who's currently running in P14 overall. He's P6 in the AMs, being led by that yellow and white car of John Sawbridge, making his debut in the Ferrari Challenge this weekend, and actually making his almost racing debut. It was certainly here in Europe and out in the Middle East over the course of the winter. We're on board with Tommaso Roca, so we're looking ahead at the John Sawbridge car. And Tommaso taking quite a bit of curb, and the Astro as well that surrounds the Mugello circuit. It's quite a technical track. It's quite flowing and very, very fast. Track limits sometimes are a bit of an issue here. Francesca then from the Formula Racing team looks on and smiles, as she so often does. Her of big hair, as you can see. Coiffured for the occasion, as always. The gap between Nielsen and Grossman, and Nicolas, with a clear track ahead of him, Callum, is just quietly going about his business and gaining a tenth or two every lap, isn't he?
Yeah, he's maintaining it. It's still quite close. I think Grossman's doing a good job at staying with him, because he's not a slow driver, that's for sure. So, yeah, to maintain within a second gap is not bad, and I think it will continue slowly, maybe 1/10 a lap still to improve. But yeah, it's looking like Nielsen's got a clear gap at the moment.
It was an interesting point that you were making when we were speaking off the air a little while ago, because Nicolas Nielsen and yourself are very similar in terms of shape, and sorry to bring up physicality, but in terms of a racing driver, you know, the physical ability that you have can be determined. And what I was really interested in was something that you were saying, as Bjorn Grossman kicks up a bit of dust there, that actually you've had to consider putting on some weight, Callum.
Yeah, I had a bit of margin personally to add on, I think, 5 kilos, as I was very, very light. And so far I've done 3.5 out of that. And yeah, in single-seaters they've now changed the rules a little bit on the minimum weights and stuff, so I have the ability to be able to do that. Whereas for the Ferrari Challenge and that, I'm pretty sure you can add a bit of weight if you want to. Of course, the benefit of having less weight as a driver is that more of the weight on the car can be put lower down, and so that's a little bit of an advantage to having that.
And of course, that's also a point in terms of, you know, we've seen drivers that are perhaps arguably, because they're a bit taller, they're a bit heavier, and that's where it makes a difference, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think the thing is with this car, it's so spread out anyway.
Yes.
It's not as a difference as it would be with single-seaters, and we really have a low centre of gravity with single-seaters, whereas this is a little bit higher and larger.
Just watching Tommaso Roca there, and a point that you made earlier on is that, you know, in these phenomenal 488 cars, you can afford to take a bit more curb, can't you? But it's, you know, it must really, when you're running across those curbs and it's going through the steering column, it must really affect you, Callum.
Yeah, I wince every time I see it, but for me, I know that would hurt if I went over it. But these cars seem to just flow over it a lot nicer than single-seaters definitely would. But yeah, the cars are obviously built quite strong and well maintained, so that's for sure.
Absolutely, no question about that. So Nielsen then leading by 1.4 seconds over Bjorn Grossman P2. Henry Hassid is P3. So we're watching Sam Smith then, who's lighting up the brake discs in these cars, the power that's put through the brakes. Extraordinary, and Sam Smith is chasing down Podoliccio ahead. Has Fabian Volvend, the lady racer, behind, and Fabian Volvend is P10, actually P8 in the pro category. So there is Sam Smith, engineered by the FF Corsa team. And Sam then, of course, won the AM Championship 2 years ago, elevated into the Pro Championship last year, and has got his eyes very much on the Pro Championship for this year. And when I was speaking to him just before the start of the race, he said, you know, going to make sure that I bank the points, Dave, and just be consistent. And he would like to be further up the grid than he was in qualifying, and would like to be further up the order than he is now, but softly, softly, as they say. Alessandro Vezzoni then, well ahead of Chris Froggatt, who now has Jens Liebhauser for company. And Niklas Nielsen then continues in his quest then in going around the final turn, the turn number 14, the Puccini turn here. And just adding a little bit more to that safety margin between himself and Bjorn Grossman, who is running in P2. So Bjorn Grossman, another multi-champion in the Ferrari Challenge, and being shown a clean pair of heels by the young whippersnapper Niklas Nielsen, who is leading the race by 1.7 seconds through the speed trap, 275 kilometers per hour for the Octane 126 driver Bjorn Grossman. And there you can see the top speeds. Nielsen 272.7, yet Bjorn Grossman 274.8 kilometers per hour. So Octane 126, we know, engineer a car very well, but so too do Formula Racing with that Niklas Nielsen car that is out front right now. Johnny Lawson, who was such a big part of the Ferrari Challenge last year. In fact, Johnny Lawson, the Copa Shell champion, will be making sporadic appearances during the course of the season, but sadly not here in Mugello. Incidentally, also going to be making an appearance, or sporadic appearances, during the course of the year, I am told, by one Mr. Philip Barron, is Florian Merckx, the Belgian racer, who will be back in a car. So that will be good to see. And hello, Florian. I'm sure you're checking us out as we speak, looking at what could be potentially your competition. So Nielsen and Grossman really have opened up a huge margin over Henry Hassid, who himself is out in a race on his own in P3 with Alessandro Vezzoni behind him. And just taking a look at the inside of the Podoliccio car there, and Jan Dennis also taking a look at trying to get ever closer to Chris Froggatt. Jens Liebhauser has got past the Chris Froggatt car. So Chris still leading the AM race, but is down in P6 in the race overall now. And about to have Jan Dennis for company, so the competition for Chris Froggatt will hot up a little bit now, because it will be a battle for the P1, P2 honours in their AM classification over the second half of this race between the white and the yellow cars that you can see. There is Sam Smith and Fabian Volvend having a real battle there. Fabian Volvend then, who took the honours at Imola of being the first ever lady racer to win a Ferrari Challenge race outright last season, and is back in the car for this season as well, chasing down the British racer Sam Smith in car number 92. Nielsen continues, whilst we're watching this, to extend his lead. The interesting battle, I think, is going to be between Chris Froggatt and Jan Dennis. The three that we had in our sights potentially as this season starts, head towards the AM Championship Challenge. It's got to be Chris Froggatt, Jan Dennis, and also Martin Nelson. Martin Nelson is some way down the order. He's running in P11. He's behind the Fabian Volvend car, but the more that these are able to start fighting between themselves, Callum, that will slow them up, won't it? Will allow more cars to come into this battle.
Yeah, it should close the gap a little bit, but I think they've got a good 14 seconds between P2 and P3, so obviously the gap will take a lot of time to to come down, but if they fight hard enough, then that could happen. Anything can happen, I guess.
And indeed, you know, one never knows when there's going to be a safety car or whatever, you know, and of course that would bunch it all back up. But at the moment, we take a super slow-mo of the concentration on the eyes of Niklas Nielsen, and also that of Chris Froggatt, the Pro and Am race leaders respectively. So over the timing line the cars come then. And we have 12 3/4 minutes left. Jan Dennis now really beginning to push Chris Froggatt, as is Fabian Volvend trying to push Sam Smith. So there is Fabian Volvend then, who not only raced in the Ferrari Challenge last year, but also raced in the Audi Sport TT Cup, which was a completely different car to be driving to this uber powerful 488 car. And has to be said, Fabian had more success in the Ferrari Challenge than she did in the Audis, that's for sure. And chasing down Sam Smith now. Chris Froggatt at the moment is not being troubled too much, although he made a small error there. Not being troubled too much by Jan Dennis, but that small error has allowed Jan to get a little bit closer. So Jan Dennis is a returning driver, and just that slight mistake that Chris Froggatt made just has allowed Jan Dennis to get a bit closer. As we run in towards the final 10 minutes of the race, Callum, of course, tyre degradation will play a part now, and all of a sudden the cars will become a little bit more difficult to handle.
Yeah, the top two have already dropped a second, so it's starting to play a factor. Towards the back, I think they've also lost a little bit more than a second.
Okay.
So it also makes it more interesting, because obviously if the car in front of you is struggling more with tyre deg, then that gives you more of an opportunity to make a pass, or even a couple of passes. So
okay.
Yeah, if you manage it quite well, you can gain a lot of places.
Well, let's see how they do manage then. We have 11 minutes of the race remaining. Also, Roca, who is in that blue car there. It's the battle for P5, or P5. John Sawbridge, Thomas O'Rourke and Joga then in P7 at the moment. And Thomas O'Rourke right in the middle of that Pro-Am battle in P6. Currently, the Am category being led by Chris Froggatt, who is now under some pressure from Jan Dennis. So we'll pick up on that battle, I'm sure, shortly. But in the meantime, Thomas O'Rourke not quite close enough to really trouble John Sawbridge ahead. Ahead of them is Christian Overgaard, we've not really mentioned. He's out on his own, and ahead of Christian Overgaard is Martin Nelson. Martin Nelson occupying the final podium place, if you like, in the Am classification. So Nielsen, Grossman, Hassid, the 1, 2, 3 in the pros. There is Chris Froggatt, who seems to have recovered nicely from the little mistake that he made. And if I'm honest with you, Jens Liebhauser ahead of Chris Froggatt now is looking a little bit wayward, and Chris Froggatt is getting ever closer to Jens Liebhauser. So that has left Jan Dennis out a little bit, so that all of a sudden, Jan Dennis is really having to push that car, the number 37 machine. You can see the brake discs light up, but Chris Froggatt is beginning to reel in the car of Jens Liebhauser. You can see the gap there is 7/10. It was 5, 6, 5, so it seesawed a little bit. There is Bjorn Grossman. Of course, back marking traffic coming into play as well a little bit now. So Froggatt and then Dennis. Let's get a live gap between the two of them. That's interesting. We will see how that develops. Of course, it wasn't Bjorn Grossman that I was looking at. It was Fabian Volvend. My apologies for that mistake. I thought they'd done jolly well to get into back marking traffic. So Jan Dennis now. This could really play into his hands. If Jens Liebhauser is able to hold up Chris Froggatt, that means that Chris Froggatt all of a sudden becomes prey to Jan Dennis, who will spot the opportunity to elevate himself potentially from P2 to P1 in the Am classification. There's the Martin Nelson car taking quite a bit of curb, and those sausage curbs, rumble strips there, which, as I say, must vibrate like heck. So different lines being taken there by Chris Froggatt and Jean Danis. Froggatt is still able to show him a clean pair of heels. We've got just under 8 minutes remaining in this race. Alessandro Vezzoni is ahead of Jens Liebhauser. Again, Liebhauser just kicking up a bit of dust. His entry into that turn was not brilliant. You can see the back end of the Liebhauser car stepping out a bit. This is allowing Chris Froggatt to get closer. In terms of the order, it would elevate Chris Froggatt into P5 overall, and crucially would put an AM driver ahead of a pro driver. And what it would also mean is that if he was able to get past Jens Liebhauser, that would give him a cushion over his AM challenger, Jean Danis, who at the moment is having to defend from Podoliccio. So, and this is really, really difficult, Callum, because, you know, if you're in a position like Jean Danis is, you're trying to attack, but you're having to defend as well. You really are kind of in a sandwich there that you can't win in a way.
Yeah, you've got to be aware of what's around you, and also if you are a bit faster than the guys in front, it is really difficult to overtake, and as soon as you get close you might make that little mistake because of the dirty air that you get from the car in front, and then you've got to watch out straight away from the guy behind. So the guys in the middle of this pack here have to be careful, but also try and improve and try and get past, but it's always difficult when you're in a group like this.
Well, Chris Froggatt there again, he took a completely different line through turn number 1, and you can see the back end of the Chris Froggatt car. There is Christian, one of the Ferrari driver instructors there, looking on at what everyone is doing here in Mugello. So Chris Froggatt then, Jens Liebhauser for the moment has been able to just break away from Froggatt a little bit and concentrate more on trying to attack Alessandro Vezzoni ahead of him. There is Vezzoni in the red and black car. Then it's Jens Liebhauser. Then it is this man, Chris Froggatt, the British driver in car number 93, who's currently leading the AM class. Again, you see more dust being kicked up by Jens Liebhauser, but Alessandro Vezzoni is beginning to become just a little bit of a cork in a bottle here, and Chris Froggatt can spot the opportunity or sense the chance is going to come his way. Now, what he needs to do is be very cool and calculated about this. The back end of that Liebhauser car is really stepping out, Callum.
Yeah, he's feeling the pressure, I think, and starting to make a bit more mistakes. And Chris Froggatt is very, very quick at the moment compared. So he's just trying to find a way past while the others are making mistakes and putting the pressure on them. But I think it is a difficult track to overtake at. So as long as he keeps it there and keeps putting the pressure, then maybe there'll be an opportunity at some point.
We will see. And here comes Liebhauser on Alessandro Vezzoni now, and Alessandro Vezzoni is a great driver, but he's someone that doesn't suffer pressure well necessarily. He can sometimes make a mistake. Liebhauser takes a look to the inside, will switch to the inside now and try and find the gap, but in fairness, Vezzoni had got a better exit, hadn't he, and was able to carry more speed. But Alessandro Vezzoni is really suffering now. That's a bold move by Jens Liebhauser. Thought there might be contact between the two of them, but respect to them both, there wasn't. And here comes Jean Danis on Chris Froggatt as well. All of a sudden, these battles are really hotting up into the final 5 minutes of this race. It could all change yet. Certainly in terms of the AM battle. Fabian Volvend also they're fighting very hard with Jean Danis. Danis trying to attack and having to think about defending as well. Fabian just takes a look at the inside. But there wasn't enough momentum there for Fabian Volvend to be able to take opportunity. Jean Danis, an experienced racer. Wow, that was an exciting few meters, Callum Eilert.
Yeah, it was. Very close racing. Obviously, they all bunched up together, so there were a lot of opportunities there to get very close, but it's very, very difficult to pass around here. And you saw through, I think, turn 2 and 3, that little opportunistic move, which
yes,
wasn't really going to work anyway, but he tried and he had a look. But still, they're close now, Wolfend and Smith.
We'll see. We will see. So Fabian Volvend is right on the back of Jean Danis. Jean Danis having to make that 488 as wide as possible as Fabian just takes a look. Beg your pardon, of course, it is Podoliccio that's looking as Fabian Volvend now on Sam Smith. Oh, this is for P7. So the Rosso Corsa Racing pit perch then, as they look at everything that's going on in the final stages of this race. The Formula Racing team, of course, their driver Niklas Nielsen some 2.8 seconds to the good. Here is Alessandro Vezzoni then continuing to defend against Jens Liebhauser. Liebhauser getting ever so frustrated, I think, now behind Alessandro Vezzoni. But to be fair, Vezzoni is not making a mistake and not giving Jens Liebhauser that opportunity to get past him. So through the chicane they come. And again, Liebhauser with tyre deg at its greatest now is perhaps struggling a little bit more than some other drivers to keep those the tyres on the tarmac, just running off a little bit. He's pushing so very hard. Just look at the curb he's taking there through that chicane in his quest to get on terms with Alessandro Vezzoni ahead of him. And there again, doing exactly the same as the car is stepping out. And Chris Froggatt now sensing the chance perhaps to get close to Jens Liebhauser once again. The more time he's kicking up dirt like that, of course, that is slowing him down and is allowing Froggatt to get a little bit closer. The pressure on Jean Danis from Podoliccio has gone away. The pressure on Sam Smith from Fabian Volvend has not. So she once again gets very close to Sam Smith. Sam again metaphorically sticking his elbows out and saying, I'm not going to give you the chance to come through. You may be a little bit quicker, but as Callum Eilert has suggested alongside us, it's difficult to overtake here at Mugello. We're on the final lap, and so it is the last chance. Got one more time through this turn for Fabian Volvend and Sam Smith. When they cross the timing line, they will have one more lap to complete. That's one more lap for Sam Smith to hold on to that position. Niklas Nielsen, barring technical disaster, should be fine. He's got 3 seconds of margin over Bjorn Grossman, who is running in P2. Best of the AMS is Chris Froggatt, and we saw him involved in that battle with Jens Liebhauser and Jan Danis. There is Bjorn Grossman that we were looking at there in P2, who really hasn't been able to take that to Niklas Nielsen, who from the very start has looked supremely dominant and has just very quietly gone about his business. In replay then on Chris Froggatt, that was Jan Danis, who just carrying so much speed through there, but then side by side that Chris Froggatt retains the inside line, so that really must be very frustrating for Jan Danis. There is Grossman, who's taken quite a bit in the last lap out of Niklas Nielsen. But surely Niklas Nielsen has got enough to just be able almost to coast to the checkered flag, knowing that he has enough in reserve to be able to take the win here at Mugello as he heads towards the checkered flag. Then Niklas Nielsen for Formula Racing will take win 1 of the season 2018 in the Ferrari Challenge. Bjorn Grossman takes P2. So pro Henry Hassid out on his own should take P3 without a problem. The battle that we saw raging just a few laps ago has really rather simmered out now, hasn't it? Because they're all gapped sufficiently not to cause problems. So the winner in AMS is going to be Chris Froggatt then. Sure enough, he crosses the line and will take the win for the AMS. It's P6 overall, but crucially it's the win in the AM class. Jan Danis will take P2 in AMS, but P7 overall. Then it's Podoliccio, then it's Fabian Volvend. Then it is Sam Smith, and Martin Nelson will come home P11, but crucially will be on the podium and will bank important points. Here comes Martin Nelson now, being pushed all the way across the line by Christian Overgaard, but Martin Nelson will find himself on the podium in the AM classification. So there we have it, done and dusted. Another success to put in the book for the Formula Racing team. It was a faultless show, really, Callum, from Niklas Nielsen, wasn't it?
Yeah, every lap very consistent. At the end, he started to struggle a bit. I don't know whether that was him taking it easy on the last lap or with the tyre degradation, but he did a good job and maintained the gap the whole way. Didn't ever get too close. And yeah, with the others, I mean, the good battles between the top 4 to 8, and yeah, it was nice to see. Very close and fair racing as well.
A lot of respect between all the drivers, isn't there? There were opportunities there towards the end of the race where we saw some drivers really struggling for grip, and there were some potential opportunities that drivers thought the better of and thought, you know what, it's just not worth it, you know.
Yeah.
And that's good to see.
Yeah, it was very close.
Okay, then the classification for you, as you can see, Nielsen, Grossman, Hassid, then it was Vezzoni, Liebhauser, Policcio, then Fabian Volvend and Sam Smith in the pros, and we'll bring you the AM classification as well, which goes the way of Froggatt, Danis, then it's Nelson, Overgaard, Sawbridge, Roca, Gilga, and Dillon, the top 8 in the classification there. So here is our race winner then, Niklas Nielsen for Formula Racing. Congratulated by Alan, the team boss. Done a good job. So they're all smiles. And Bjorn Grossman also over there to congratulate him. So let's take a look at the highlights of that race now. As they headed towards the green, Niklas Nielsen it was that got the jump on Bjorn Grossman. Always had the inside line, so it was always going to be turn 1 where the battle was going to be won, and it was won by Niklas Nielsen. Henry Hassid was able to move up a place, and Chris Froggatt was hung out on the outside. Formula Racing team were expecting a result. Tommaso Roca, we went on board with around the Mugello circuit. So the Sawbridge car, which is the spare car because he had an off during pre-practice, being put to good use. Bjorn Grossman tried very hard to keep on terms with Niklas Nielsen, but Nielsen really did have the edge, and Chris Froggatt then was in a battle all on his own in the AMS, and Jan Danis, it looked like he'd got past but carried too much speed, and Chris Froggatt just maintaining his cool meant that he would have the inside line for the next turn, which secured him the AM win. But Niklas Nielsen took the race overall and was the best of the pro drivers, followed home by Bjorn Grossman, and Formula Racing, a very happy team, and Chris Froggatt the winner in the AMS. So Chris Froggatt being congratulated down there. And Danis, good to see Scuderia Prague back in the Ferrari Challenge, and Bjorn Grossman with a very creditable P2. Yeah, various members of the Froggatt contingent as he takes on some water. Drivers will be heading up to the podium in due course. So yes, drivers making their way up there as we speak. Of course, 2 podiums to come, one for the pro drivers, one for the AM drivers as well. Super slow-mos of the top 3 then, and first of all, P3, Henry Hassid. P2 goes the way of the German driver, Bjorn Grossman. No mistaking the winner, though. From Formula Racing, Niklas Nielsen. So, as I mentioned, we will be heading up to the podium shortly. Niklas Nielsen congratulated there. And there we can see the podium being readied for the trophy presentations for Pro and AM. Michele Mambrelli then to the man to the right of the podium. We'll bring the drivers out to receive their trophies. So we do the pros first of all. Here comes Henry Hassid then. Was very much a regular on the podium last year in the Ferrari Challenge. Here comes Bjorn Grossman. And on the top step once again it will be Niklas Nielsen for Formula Racing. National anthem then plays out for Niklas Nielsen. So the somewhat shortened version of the national anthem, Niklas Nielsen. And trophy presentations then. Henry Hassid receives his. Davide Rigon here presents the trophy to Bjorn Grossman, P2. And Niklas Nielsen then takes the winner's trophy. And Formula Racing collecting the team's trophy and then the separate Pirelli trophy as well, delivered by Patrick Dragosset. So the Trofeo Pirelli Pro podium done and dusted. It'll be time for the AM podium next. Never having done it, Callum Eilert, as you have, you've been on every step of the podium. What does it really feel like? Because I've never done it. I've never, you know, apart from some karting success, you know, not proper.
I think the first time's the most special in a way. And I would say the most excitement is when you're in the car and you're on the final lap and you know you're going to make it. I'd say it's a sort of more of a satisfaction when you're on the podium, like you've achieved the job in a way.
Okay. Drivers' Championship then, led by Niklas Nielsen now with 23 points. Bjorn Grossman on 16. Henry Hassid then on 13. Alessandro Vezzoni, Jens Liebhauser, Vicente Podeliccio, then Fabian Volvend and Sam Smith. That's the way the Drivers' Championship looks after the first race. And we do still have another podium to come, that for the AM drivers, of course. And it will be Chris Froggatt on the top step of that podium. And the view behind the podium area, sort of into the paddock, if you like. The drivers are being brought out as we speak. Sure enough, there's Martin Nelson, there is Jean Danis, and there on the top step of the podium is Chris Froggatt. And national anthem time. So we look at the back end of the Chris Froggatt car. The number 93 machine. Nice shots of that number 93 car. So trophies being presented up there on the podium as we continue our walk round of the Ferrari 488 of Chris Froggatt, supported by H.R. Owen and FF Corsa, of course. So Chris then with very much the championship target sights. He receives the Pirelli trophy as well. Davide Rigon once again making the trophy presentations here in Mugello. So it is Chris Froggatt, Jean Danis and Martin Nelson, the podium placers in the Trofeo Pirelli AM Drivers' Championship. And obligatory photographs being taken. Fleet of foot, Martin Nelson. There's Anthony Cheshire just there, the team boss of FF Corsa, as we take super slow-mos to the top three in the AMs. Scuderia Autoropa, Martin Nelson, P3. P2, Scuderia Prague, Jean Danis. And P1, number 93, Chris Froggatt. So both podiums done, pros and AMs, and super slow-mo there of Martin Nelson, fleet of foot with the champagne, and Chris Froggatt and Jean Danis enjoying themselves up there on the podium as well. Interesting face you're pulling there, Martin Nelson. Drivers' Championship then, Chris Froggatt leads from Jean Danis, Martin Nelson, then it's Christian Overgaard, John Sawbridge, Thomas O'Rourke, Gyoga and John Dillon, the top 8 then in the AM Drivers' Championship, the podium of which we have just seen. We have a Copa race to come a little bit later this afternoon here at Mugello, the Ferrari Challenge. It's round 1 here in Mugello, off to the warm temperatures of Silverstone after this round. I think not somehow. Great shot of the Mugello circuit here. On the basis of the last round in 2017, Finale Mondiali held here in Mugello. This year the Finale Mondiali goes the way of Monza, which is often, or for as long as I've been involved in the Ferrari Challenge, has always been the opening round. So Mugello and Monza swap places this year, and Monza will be the home of the glittering Finale Mondiali right at the end of the season, but a whole lot of race action to come from the season before we get there. The Mugello circuit then playing host to race 1 in the season. So that's it. We'll see you later for Copa. Bye-bye.